All right, this is the review for quiz number 14. A few more of the jobs in the music business, roles and things that people do. All right, the first thing is about the record company. It is the record company. It owns the master recording, right? That's the whole reason they exist, right? We often will think like, well, the artist owns the record. No, the record company owns the record, okay? Okay, so on top of that, the record label is who pays for the studio time. Record label, record company, same entity, excuse me, same thing. And this is how, when I'm working on a smaller project, I personally decide who has access to the recording, to the work that I have done, right? The person that paid for the studio time is who I consider to be the record company, right? If it's the guitarist in the band, they paid for the studio time, they paid for my time, then they're the one that I believe owns the recording, right? If the drummer calls and says, hey, I need those tracks, can I get those? I'm just going to try and mix them. I'm going to check with the guitarist, right? Because I don't know, maybe they split up, maybe the band broke up, he's going to take the recording and do something that the guitarist is going to be angry about, but the guitarist is the one who paid me, right? So that's, and the more you dig into the history of recording and record companies, you'll hear more and more of those types of stories where, oh, we smuggled the tapes out so the record label couldn't do this or that or the other thing. Okay. Anyway, the next thing is the mixer. So the person who mixes, what they do is they assemble and balance the tracks, right? They're deciding which tracks they're going to use, making the different levels, compressing, EQing, all the fun stuff that we've already talked about and done a little bit of. That's what the job of the mixer is. Now, a lot of times us as the mixer, we're also going to do the editing, right? But in larger situations, you might have a separate editor. A lot of times this is the mixing engineer. If it's a big mixing engineer, he might have an assistant. And he sends the assistant off with the new tracks that just came in and says, hey, right, pick the best guitar solo, put that on there. Or even if you've got 200 tracks, right, I know of one mixing engineer who he makes his editor chop it down to like 44 tracks, right? If you've got 18 background vocals, well, just condense that down to a stereo track. Give me all the, and then, you know, get rid of a lot of those. So that's the editor's job. He chooses the takes and the tracks. The last person to talk about is the arranger. And it's a little easier to think about an arranger in old-timey things or in big jazz or orchestral situations where it's someone who sits down and assigns the different musical parts, right? And that's a job of a person. They figure out who's going to play this. The trumpets are going to play this here. The flute's going to play that there. And then, right, everybody plays together here, right? You think, oh, a rock band doesn't really have an arranger. And I suppose it probably doesn't have a separate guy, but there's usually somebody in the band, right, the bossiest person in the band, who's going to say, all right, so you play this during this part, and then it's going to be Jimmy's solo, and then we're going to go back to the bridge, right? So that's exactly the job of an arranger, right? Assigning the musical parts. Okay, good, very much. Thank you very much. And we'll be back soon.